now, Marianne, for the slides.
Is that okay? Does that get for everyone? Does that, right?
Can you see my?
He's, and has everyone got the screens sharing slides? At the moment, it's showing all the slides on the left. Ah, no, now it's gone over.
Okay, is
Yeah,
that right now?
yes, that's fine.
That's fine. It's working perfectly.
Okay, great. Okay, so as Marianne says, I'm Keir Windsor. I work for UK Hempcrete, and we've also got a material supply business called Natural Building Store. I'm going to talk about hempcrete and other natural materials. Hempcrete's an insulating wall material that you can see in the building on the right there, and it's made of the chopped woody stem of the industrial hemp plant bound together with a lime binder. And the other materials I'm going to mention are lime plaster, lime render, wood fiber board, um, cork board, and soft insulation, such as sheep's wool or hemp fiber. These are the services that we offer. So we've got um, natural and bio-based materials. We do training and consultancy, and we've also got an architecture practice within the group. So if you need a building designing for you, or if you want technical drawings of wall build-ups, we can do that. So I'm going to talk mostly about natural materials in relation to retrofit. So that is existing buildings, obviously, but all of these materials that I'll talk about can also be used in new build and either houses or commercial, and the principle and the methods are the same, really. So if you are going to insulate your building, there are lots of benefits to using natural materials, and I'm going to talk about these on the next few slides. But low carbon footprint, thermal comfort, vapor permeability, humidity regulation, and excellent indoor air quality. Just taking the environmental advantages first. Plant-based materials have got a lower carbon footprint than oil-based materials. And hempcrete is actually carbon negative, even allowing for the burning of the lime, which is obviously quite high intensity. So hempcrete's got a carbon footprint of minus 75 kilos of CO2 per cubic meter, and that's for hempcrete blocks. Or for hemp fiber, 0.7 kilos for every kilo of the hemp fiber. Now, one of the key benefits of natural materials is vapor permeability, and that is that they allow water vapor to pass through the building fabric, preventing moisture being trapped in it. So in this building here, obviously between the panels, it would have been wattle and daub when it was originally built, but that's now been, I assume the wattle and daub has decayed at some point due probably to being cement rendered. So this has now been replaced by hempcrete, and a lime render has been put over the top of that. Improving the insulation of the buildings, obviously one of your key aims, and that obviously is going to make the living space more comfortable, and that will have knock-on effects in terms of environmental and cost benefits. And this is precast hempcrete blocks being applied to the inside of the wall. Natural materials usually need a bit more space than for oil-based materials such as Kingspan Celotex, but they do have other benefits. So in the case of hempcrete, because it's a medium density insulation rather than lightweight insulation, it actually does hold quite a lot of heat in the mass of the hempcrete itself. and it also has an excellent fire performance. So you've got a fire resistance time of I think 45 minutes for a 12 centimeter block and 2 hours for a 20 centimeter block. And that's with a lime plaster finish on the Hempcrete. So if we take the first point here on humidity regulation, then water vapor will want to move from areas of high humidity, such as inside the room, to areas of lower humidity. So it will pass, in this case, with a Hempcrete wall again, it will pass from the room into the Hempcrete wall. It'll then be released back into the room again when the humidity drops, or it will pass through the wall to the outside. And that prevents liquid water forming on the surfaces of the walls, and that will obviously prevent things like black mold forming. The Hempcrete, you can see the texture of the Hempcrete here, and the woody material that forms the Hempcrete is also very readily absorbs and releases water vapor, so that tends to keep the humidity in the room nice and stable. And then the second point there are no toxic additives that are going to be released into the room from a natural material like Hempcrete. So you don't get, for example, VOCs, which you do with some materials. So in this slide, we've got a traditional brick wall as it would have been built. See, it's built with lime mortar between the brickwork. You've got lime plaster down the inside. And this means that water vapor can pass through the lime plaster into the mortar and can pass through the wall to the outside. Now, when you've got rain coming onto the outside of the wall, as it obviously will, then it can work its way a certain distance into the lime mortar, but unless it's a very exposed wall, it's going to dry out again before, generally speaking, before it's going to work its way all the way through the wall, because the weather will dry that out. And a brick wall like this, 9-inch brick wall, would have a U value of between 1.7 and 2, so pretty poor insulation value. This diagram showing how moisture can build up in an old wall where impermeable finishes have been applied to the wall. So in this case, you've got gypsum plaster been added down the inside here, cement render added on the outside, and because cement render is quite brittle, it will quite likely at some point crack. And so rain falling on the outside will penetrate in, and then because the cement render and the gypsum plaster are not really very vapor permeable, the moisture can't then escape, so it will tend to be trapped behind the cement render. On the inside, the floor has actually been made, well, the moisture problem has been made worse by the fact that the concrete slab has been laid over the original floor. So this would probably have been earth with perhaps stone slabs over, but the fact that you've got now a concrete slab, probably with a damp-proof membrane, means that the moisture can't escape through that and has been pushed up into the wall. And on the outside, this ground level is higher than it should be and probably higher than it originally was. And that's also driving moisture into the wall. So overall, you've got quite a nasty combination of factors. Even though these things were done with the best of intentions, it's meant the wall is now it's got a lot of moisture in it and is actually performing worse than it would have done originally. And you're quite likely getting black mold forming on the inside of the wall. These are the natural materials that we would be using. The only one that we're not showing here, the only one we're not showing here is expanded corkboard. And so hempcrete block, I'm going to say a bit more about them as I go through, but hempcrete block, wood fibre board, cork-based insulating lime plaster, and soft insulation. So that could be hemp fibre or sheep's wool, other natural fibres potentially. So in terms of whether you put natural insulation on the outside or the inside of the wall, the simple short answer is that the ideal would be to put it on the outside if you can, but there's quite a lot of factors that will influence that, including conservation and planning. Are you allowed to change the appearance, and do you want to? The existing condition of the building and whether there are repairs to be made already to the outside. U value and performance targets, what sort of finish you're going to have on the outside, and costs versus the energy saved. So the reasons why you would want to use external wall insulation, you can see wood fibre board here being fixed on the outside of a wall with, you can see little mechanical fixings. The second bullet point here should really be at the top, because that's the most important, and that is that if you put the insulation on the outside, you're keeping the thermal mass of the stone and the brickwork, or stone or brickwork, it's going to be warming up. You're keeping that within the thermal envelope. So the heat from the house will warm up the masonry, and you'll be storing heat. There's a lower probability of thermal bridging. Because you've got a brand new facade, effectively, then you've got reduced likelihood of moisture coming in. And then these last 2 points are quite important, and they're related to each other, which is that if you put your insulation on the inside of the wall, you will be cooling the masonry wall because less heat is reaching it from the house. And that gives you a risk. If you cool the wall too much, there's a risk when water vapor passes through the natural insulation, it can condense out when it hits the masonry wall. So if you're putting insulation on the outside, that risk is not there because you're effectively warming up the masonry. And that also means you can go thicker with external wall insulation. There's a couple of pictures here of hempcrete blocks being used on the outside of a building. Obviously, there's going to be some changes to make around the windows, and potentially a bit of change at the roof line. And I think something has been done there at the edge of the roof to make sure the top of the insulation is protected. And this is a lime render has been applied there on the right hand side. Another option, and this can be used inside or outside, is an insulating base coat. And this is a lime base coat with cork granules in, and it's called diathanite. And it's got a very good insulation value, about the same as wood fibre board. It's good where you haven't got that much thickness available, and it's also very good on uneven surfaces, because as you can see, it would form around anything. This has actually been pumped onto the wall, which you can see above here, but George is leveling it out in this photo. So the advantage of using the insulation on the inside of the wall are, obviously, you keep your external appearance the same. It's suitable mainly for solid walls that are built with lime mortar, so brick or stone, lime mortar between. Obviously, it avoids any changes around windows and so on, which is saving you money. And it's also easier to install bit by bit, and so possibly room by room as your budget allows. Now you've got, again, some hempcrete blocks here, but being used internally. Some underfloor heating pipes visible there, which are going to be covered by a limecrete slab in due course. And there are lots of videos and downloads about the installation of hempcrete blocks on our Natural Building Store website. So I think Jeff's going to talk a bit about wet cast, or, well, in fact, sprayed hempcrete in a bit. But if you're this is our director Alex Sparrow installing some wet cast hempcrete behind shuttering, and the fixings in the wall here that stick out from the wall, that gives the hempcrete something to cling on to. But generally speaking, we'd say for internal insulation, if you want to use hempcrete, you'd be better using hempcrete blocks than wet cast because of the drying time, because it's much more difficult to dry hempcrete inside a building than it is outside a building. But you can do either. HL mix is a dry crushed hempcrete. It's basically a crushed up hempcrete block. So you could have done this in blockwork, hempcrete blockwork, and put the dry mix down the back, or you could also use wet cast hempcrete down the back. With internal insulation with wood fibre board, you can see that in the diagram here. It's applied in much the same way as using wood fibre board outside, except that you'd normally put a levelling coat of lime plaster on the wall first, which you can do that outside as well, but you'd allow this levelling coat completely dry, and once that's done, you can then bond the wood fibre board to it with a lime adhesive. So where you're using it inside, you don't really have to apply mechanical fixings. There's just a few cautions on this slide about modern wall types with natural insulations, and they generally don't use internal wall insulation with a filled cavity wall. Don't use a dot and dab technique, because you can create a cavity where moisture can form. And if you're wanting to go thicker than about 60 mil on a modern wall type, we'd say do have some hydrothermal modelling done to check what the risk of moisture accumulation is. And then these are just the last few slides. Some soft insulation being used in a roof situation here. This is hemp fibre, and also I think this one's wood fibre. This is a not the rigid wood fibre board, but a springy slab. And then in this suspended floor, again, soft insulation used between the floor joists, and the black layer you can see here is a vapor permeable membrane that's been laid in and out of the joists and is actually supporting the insulation. So this has been installed from above, but this membrane, and this is the white, is also the grey, is also a vapor permeable membrane. Those are making the performance of the soft insulation much better, because they're stopping any warm air being sucked out of the insulation from the cold air that's moving around in this void down here. So it's airtight, but it's vapor permeable. And then if you want to insulate your floor, you can't really use hempcrete below ground level. So we would typically be using foam glass, and this is recycled glass that's had air blown into at high temperatures. Glaypor is one of the trade names, and this is how it's used. So the Glaypor is here in the under the with a membrane wrapped around it. Again, a vapor permeable membrane. It's had a limecrete slab laid on the top with, in this case, underfloor heating pipes in it. And you've got an expanded cork board against the brickwork there to stop heat escaping into the brickwork. And the Glaypor doesn't, it allows water to drain freely through it, but it doesn't allow water to come up by capillary reaction because the gaps are too big, and it's totally unaffected by moisture, so it can sit there even if this area was totally flooded. That's not a problem. And then these are some of the manufacturers we supply. Retrofit Right is a service we're launching at the moment, mainly for social landlords and housing associations. But if you did want to know anything about that, then go to the Retrofit Right website. And that's the end of my bit. That's the email address if you wanted to contact us for materials. And I think we're going to do questions later on. So thank you very much. And that is the end of my section.
Thanks very much. Sorry, I was just trying to deal with various people who haven't been able to get in or whatever. Yes, that's very useful. Okay, I think if you have questions, you could put them in the chat if it's working properly. Although I don't seem to be able to get the chat taking things. I don't know if anyone else has tried it. I think we're having the talk, and then we were going to move on to people homeowners who have used, talking about their experiences of insulation of various sorts. And we have three of us. I'm one of them, and then there is Jeff Litherland and Jeremy White. So I think I will start, if that's all right, with Jeremy to explain what your experience has been of using insulation and which sort you used.
Okay, I'm very happy to do that. So I'll just talk briefly about our experiences here of insulating some rooms in the house, and then obviously very happy to take questions. So just to give a bit of background, the house concerned is a stone-built Derbyshire farmhouse, most of which I think dates from the late 19th century, although it was probably not all built at the same time. But it's essentially a stone-built house within the Peak Park, so constraints on what you can do with it. And my wife and I moved here 12 years ago now. And when we moved here, there was a gas auger in our kitchen. And the kitchen is on the north side of the house. And it has 3 external walls. And the gas auger kept it nice and cozy, but it didn't burn up a lot of gas. And we didn't like, augers, I think, a bit kind of Marmite, aren't they? Some people love them and some people don't. And we were neither of us terribly keen on the auger, and it was burning up loads of gas. So we took it out, and then surprise, surprise, the kitchen was cold. It had one other radiator, and that radiator wasn't up to the job of keeping the room warm. So we put another radiator in. And that made a bit of difference, but it didn't really solve the problem. So we thought we need to do something a bit more definitive to make it warm. And as I said, it's 3 outside walls on the north side of the house, so it's not ideally placed. And the kitchen fittings were tired. Our predecessor had put them in, but they were 20 years old, so there was no reason particularly to be precious about the kitchen fitting. So he thought, okay, let's do it properly, and we will take all the kitchen fittings out, put some proper insulation on the walls, and then fit a new kitchen, which is essentially what we did. I have to say that before we did that, we took some advice from Nick Parsons, and I know some of you, probably many of you, will know Nick or know of Nick. He's a sort of guru of home energy efficiency in Sheffield. Very nice guy, and came and gave us some advice, and he said, yes, the only option here really is internal wall insulation. We can't put external wall insulation on because it would alter the external appearance, and the peak part wouldn't like that, and so on and so forth. So internal wall insulation was the only option, which is what we did. But following Nick's advice, we were very clear that we wanted to use a breathable system. He said Kingspan is a very bad idea in these circumstances, and he did the relevant hydro whatever it is calculations about internal wall condensation and so on and so forth. And what we did was we put 10 centimeters of cork, expanded cork, as an internal insulation with a lime plaster coverage on top. Fortunately, the kitchen is actually a fairly generously sized room, so losing that amount of space in the kitchen was not a problem. We had to use slightly less on the window reveals, so we've got 2 centimeters of cork going down the window reveals. We didn't need to change any of the windows, but I can see that in some circumstances one might need to do that. We fortunately didn't have to, and so that's what we did, and it worked a treat. It was really met our requirements in terms of keeping the kitchen warm. We had it all done. We then fitted a new kitchen, and in fact, the second radiator which we had put in came out, partly as a result of the redesign, but also we didn't need it. So it's now a nice, cozy kitchen, very well insulated, and it, as I said, it works a treat. And of course, in the kitchen, you do generate a lot of water vapor from cooking and so on, but we have had absolutely no problems that I'm aware of, touching wood, of condensation or anything like that, because we have an entirely breathable system. I think Keir mentioned the issue about having to remove existing wall covering, and there was some gypsum plaster on the wall, and that all had to be hacked off. So that was all taken off, and then a parge coat of lime cement put on before the cork, and then the lime plaster on top of that. It was hellish messy. It took quite a long time. It takes a long time for lime plaster to dry out, but it was worth it in the end. And that we had done probably about 8 or 9 years ago now. So we were very, very pleased with that. And we then, in the fullness of time, thought that we might want to do something similar to the rest of the house. So it's quite a reasonably generously sized Derbyshire farmhouse, and we got Nick to come back and give us some further advice, and we talked about internal wall insulation throughout the rest of the house, and we hummed and hawed about that because it's quite disruptive. I mean, if you're doing it properly, you really have to go back to the stonework, and if you've got plaster work on the ceiling picture rails and recessed cupboards and all that sort of thing, it's quite a major disruption to undertake, and we had that all quoted for, but the cost was going to be very, very considerable, and in the end we decided that we weren't going to go ahead with a whole house retrofit, primarily because it was going to be very expensive, and many tens of thousands of pounds to do the whole thing, but also because it was going to be too disruptive. So we scaled that back, and there are two rooms, which my wife and I use as study rooms. And so they are rooms where we tend to be sitting down at a desk. I'm in one of them now. And when you're sitting down at a desk and not being active, you tend to feel the cold more. So we thought, okay, well, we won't do the whole thing. We'll just do these two rooms and make these two rooms as well insulated as we possibly can, which is not ideal. I mean, the ideal is to do the whole thing, but we thought, well, this is a compromise. We'll just do these two rooms, and that's what we did maybe 3 years ago now. 3 years ago. And on this occasion, simply because we had a different contractor doing the work, we ended up putting 10 centimetres of wood fibre board, not cork, because the contractor who did the work was used to working with wood fibre. And my understanding, and some people who are more technically minded will perhaps say differently, but my understanding is that to all intents and purposes, there's no real difference between wood fibre and cork. They're a breathable material, that's a crucial thing. And the 10 centimetres of one is equivalent to 10 centimetres of the other. So we had those done. We had some better insulation put in the ceiling, and including in some pitched ceiling where there's a bit of sloping ceiling coming down that cuts off the upper corner of the room, and we had some additional wood fibre, thinner wood fibre put in the spaces between the rafters there. For these two upper rooms, the plaster work on the wall was actually all lime plaster, so there was no need to hack it off. In the kitchen, it was gypsum plaster. For whatever reason, that had been done at some point. So we had to hack that all off. But in the second round, it was lime plaster. So we were able to leave that in situ. And we, again, as I said, put 10 centimetres of wood fibre board on with a lime coating on, a bit of insulation on the internal walls where it comes back from an external corner, just to stop the bridging there, and made sure that the insulation went under the floorboards and also up into the roof space. So it was pretty comprehensively done. And again, we have been very pleased with the outcome. I mean, it certainly made a substantial difference to both the rooms in which it's been done, and we're very happy with that. Again, very disruptive. It's a very messy process. It's not quick. If you're going to get it done properly, it's not a quick in and out job and then fly off and do something else. It's a matter of weeks to get it all done, and then the lime plaster takes time to dry off and so on and so forth. And depending on the layout of your central heating and your electricity, you might have to have electric plugs moved, and central heating. I had to have the radiator moved in this room, and that sort of thing. And that, of course, is work, added time, added cost. But overall, it has definitely been worth doing. Even though it's only in the two rooms and we haven't had the whole room done. So in a nutshell, that's where we've got to. Very pleased with the outcome. It is expensive. It is disruptive. You won't save the money on your heating bills for a long time. You don't think you can do the internal wall insulation and then recoup the cost over a couple of years on lower heating bills. It ain't like that in my experience. But nevertheless, from my point of view, it has definitely been worth doing, and I would advocate it for anyone else as well. It may be that sometime in the future we might bite the bullet and do the rest of the house, but I might die before I get round there. I don't know. There we are. So happy to take any questions on that. And anyone who wants to come and look, we've had open eco homes sessions here, and people have come and had a look at what we've done. I'm very happy for anyone to come round if they want to.
Yes, I think, can we leave questions till after the two other people who are, so that we can do all the questions and discussion at the end? Is that okay? I'll now ask Jeff Littleland to talk about his experience of using dealing with insulation in a very old house.
Thank you. I'm going to try and share some slides as well. So can people see that?
Yes.
I'm
Got
just gonna...
all of the slides. Can you?
Yeah. I'm going to just, there we go. Okay, so I work very closely with Keir and Alex on our project, and I thoroughly recommend working with them. Alex came round and kind of did I suppose I would call it a survey. We live on 37A St. John Street by the Memorial Garden in Wirksworth. It's a Grade 2 listed building, mainly kind of limestone with some brick facing and some sandstone facing. So it is listed, so we did have to use internal insulation. The house was a real rack and ruin, so we are fortunate enough to be able to just strip it back and kind of start from scratch. And just reiterating what Jeremy was saying, it's so disruptive and messy, these kind of processes. But this photograph shows you, so we didn't want to use any polysuccinate boards, which is of the Kingspan stuff. We wanted to use all natural materials. That's kind of in keeping with a lot of the kind of conservation stuff around old buildings, but also just in terms of sort of environmental issues too. So you can see on this, this is our bedroom. We had 200 mil of warm shell boards on the ceiling and 100 mil of sprayed on hempcrete on the walls.
Oh, sorry, Jeff, I muted you by mistake. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. One of the things that actually I found was actually working with building control. They had no idea about some of these materials and were a bit sort of funny about them in terms of being up to speed with some of the U values. And so, however, it's a listed building, so we don't have to adhere to those. But Keir and his team put some really good sort of U value calculations together, and that kind of appeased their ideas of how a contemporary insulated building should be. Having said that, just to reiterate what Keir was saying, is that Hempcrete and the warm shell boards retain the heat, whereas Kingspan doesn't. So we have a system where we have a ground source heat pump and underfloor heating, and we have have the heating on sparingly, but the house the hempcrete just retains the heat of the house. It's quite amazing, and this is just it just gives you kind of a rough idea of what most of the house is kind of like. 100 mil of hempcrete insulation on the walls, 200 mil on the wall on the ceilings, and then everything's got about 10 mil lime plaster on top. So everything is breathable. I've repointed a lot of the exterior stonework to make that lime as well. So just trying to keep it all kind of everything singing from the same hymn sheet, as rather than having kind of opposing kind of building ideologies. I'll just go through these. Just again, this is the practice of what a lot of the materials that Keir was mentioning. We use lamb's wool, cozy wool in the ceiling rafters. And there's a shot of the hempcrete being sprayed on. Such a messy process, but sort of relatively quick. And one thing we were keen on, this is the spraying rather than the blocks. I did some shuttering myself to get kind of a straight, to put the corner shower in. We shuttered it to make it get a straight finish. But we were the building was wonky as anything. The walls were wonky, so we were quite happy to not have any straight edges anywhere, and there are no straight edges anywhere in the house. So we've got these lovely curves everywhere. We used for the windows, these are old windows, we couldn't replace them because of the listing. We used the cork, so the diathanate on the inside of the windows, just to get you can get a thinner thickness to get the same kind of U values as the hempcrete. yeah, so just some examples. This is the before through the process, and now we have this lovely, quite contemporary looking, everything's lime washed, just white throughout. And then just as an addition, I saw in Alex's book, is it the Hempcrete House, Keir? What's it called? Sorry, you're on mute.
The Hempcrete book.
Hempcrete book, lovely. There was this larder, a Hempcrete larder, and we had space for one. It's a north. We've got a north kitchen with a north-facing wall, and yeah, he gave me some tips on how to build this, and this is fantastic. This is even in so there's 200 mil of Hempcrete, an insulated door, and even in summer it's still around 14 degrees in the height of summer, which is fine for things like, mustards, mayonnaise, things like that don't need to be in the fridge. And in winter, it's really nice and cold, so we can put beers and things in there. And this means that only got a very small fridge. We put most of our things in there, vegetables. We have a tiny fridge for kind of for milk and meats and things like that. But that's a really nice addition. It's quite old fashioned, in the old, 50, 60 years ago, all houses had kind of larders before kind of refrigeration. But yeah, that's worked really well for us. And that's it. So happy to take any questions as well.
Yes. Right. Thanks very much. Both of you have got very good, interesting experiences of natural materials. My experience of insulation has been a bit different. I did my original retrofit in 2010, 2011, because when I moved to Wirksworth, and I was a keen climate activist and wanting to reduce my carbon footprint, and I bought a 1930s bungalow, which was badly in need of some tender loving care. And so at that time, no one seemed to know anything about the whole business of retrofitting. And so I got the good advice of using a particular builder. I wasn't into architects at that time. So I got a builder who was keen on conservation work. And so he did have a good idea of some of the features of a building and how it should be dealt with. So the house was practically gutted. I'll just list what I had done. New double glazed aluminium windows, total external wall insulation with, I don't know if it's Kingspan, but one of those, 80 millimeters thick, which was well above the expectation at that time for the amount of insulation that would be needed. I had insulation under the floors, blocks put between the I can't remember think words these days. But there's insulation under the floor, which I don't really notice very much. And loft insulation, again, wool, what is it? Wool? Loft insulation via the subsidized scheme at the time. Solar panels, no batteries, they weren't being used then. And I went for a Vaillant gas boiler because I felt that air source heat pumps were still a bit too new, and I was talking to a person who was very experienced, and he reckoned that they would be okay, but it was probably also okay to go for a good quality gas boiler. So I did with the German Vaillant. And I'm waiting for it to conk out, and then I'll probably get an air source heat pump. Now, okay, so I did that. My EPC before I started was F. Below, I think, is there a G? I'm not sure there is a G. So I then well, I got involved in the Community Land Trust here, and we were originally hoping to build passive house standard, very, very well insulated houses for social housing. But in fact, we weren't able to find the land and a housing association partner to do that. And so we then switched to advising about retrofitting, and we got the money for a thermal imaging camera. So as soon as we got that camera, I tried it out on my house, and I discovered that the lofts, all 4 lofts around my bungalow were spilling out heat like anyone, it's very obvious that needed dealing with. And so phase 2 of my retrofit with more knowledge was doing something about that. And I did employ an architect because who was experienced in passive house. And at the end, what he discovered that the insulation that had been laid in 2010, 2011 had been very badly done and didn't go anywhere near the eaves because there was some sort of beam there and it just went up to the beam. And then, so that was a question of how to deal with that. And because the eaves come down to a very small point, how do you get insulation right to the end of to the edge of the eaves? And what they did was actually create an air barrier of air, between the insulation and the roof, so that the air that was needed to ventilate the roof and that area still acted, so it wasn't going to cause a problem with that. And they also, they actually created more insulation in the top edge of my downstairs rooms, so that where the wall comes up to a right angle for the ceiling, they put in a whole lot of insulation. So it looks a bit like this, the way you have when you have a roof that's going down a room. It's a slanting area that actually has insulation. And so, that I was very pleased to have. And I haven't actually, I didn't get an EPC done after I had the work done on the rest of the house. And so I decided after I'd had this extra work done, I would get an EPC done. And I got one now for B, and it's a high B. Well, not a high B. They now have the EPC, each one from where's the G up to A, have a number, set of numbers, so that the calculation gives you a level within that grade. And mine came out at 89B, which is out of 81 to 91 points. And so was pretty high on that. And it has the potential for 90B, but I'm not quite sure what could be done for that. What I did find was that one of the things I did, and this is one thing I want to emphasize for anyone on this session, is that whenever you are looking at increasing your insulation, you must take account of moisture and air tightness and ensure that your house is getting sufficient ventilation. So I, in fact, have had installed a demand controlled ventilation. I think people have heard of there are various other sorts of ventilation, and the main ones I've heard about was mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. And if you've got a very, do you have that, Jeff? Do you have a ventilation system for?
No, we don't. We're not passive at all. We've got loads of old wonky windows and leaks and stuff. But we've got secondary glazing everywhere. But yeah, we don't have that. Yeah, but yeah, I know for a lot of passive houses and houses with very good insulation, that's kind of necessary, isn't it?
Well, and I felt that, and I was being advised by a friend who does passive house, that it certainly would be worth doing. And so but what I got was not the one that is done for passive house, is has a heat recovery that means that it has to be run all the time. And so it uses a fair bit of electricity. Whereas mine, which is sort of depends on whether the house needs, the moisture level in the house, and the ventilation's only switched on when it's needed because the moisture is increased, and then it goes off when the moisture is back to what it should be. And what I found when I had the EPC done was that if you have a heat recovery, mechanical ventilation heat recovery, it takes points off your EPC rate because of the amount of electricity it uses. And so I said, well, I don't have heat recovery. I have this much lower energy, demand controlled. And he said, well, our scoring system doesn't include that. If we put anything in for ventilation, it has to be this heat recovery thing. So I said, well, so I did all that work to get a ventilation system, and it doesn't even count for anything in my EPC. And that was the case. So that's where I came at the end of mine. So I think that I think we should probably move on to the questions, because I'm sure quite a few people have questions. And I suppose I'm not sure, Lisa, I haven't seen anything coming up in chat, so it's probably, have you?
There's no questions in the chat yet, no.
So we'll leave that then. And I think what you probably the people here, you can unmute yourselves when you are asking a question, and probably put your hand, either use the hand up icon that you can get in our system, or start waving your hand around, which is what I'm better at noticing. But I've asked Lisa as a co-host to deal with the questions because I'm very deaf, and it's quite difficult for me to.
There's a question from Ruth and from Roger in the chat. I don't know if Ruth, you want to ask your question.
Right. Ruth.
Sorry, I was muted. So hi, thank you for that. That was really informative. My question was, can insulation solve damp issues? You were saying some of the presenters said insulation can create damp issues, but can it solve them?
What here? Could you?
Yeah. Are the walls? Have you got walls that are underground, Ruth?
We've got solid stone walls, and it's probably condensation damp. Is the issue.
So you've got uninsulated stone walls. And do you know what sort of, have you got any, do you know whether it's gypsum or lime plaster on the inside of them?
No, I don't.
I think the ways in which insulation can solve damp issues is if you're making a wall more vapor open. So if you've got a stone wall that for some reason is like the one I showed in the diagram where moisture is actually getting trapped in the wall, then obviously if you can improve that, that will help. Because yeah, obviously once the wall is damp, it will tend to attract more condensation because it's cold, the temperature of it lowers. So I suppose the aims would be to dry the wall out by making sure there's no impermeable finishes on it, and that would include gypsum plaster, and it would also include, unfortunately, modern paints really as well. Like even emulsion is not really vapor open, so you could use if you had a lime plaster, you could use, as Jeff's done, you could use a lime wash, or you could use a clay paint like Earthborn. Those are vapor permeable. But basically, if you've not got water coming into the wall from leaks, or because it's underground, then insulating the wall on the inside should stop condensation really, because you're warming up the surface of the wall substantially. So with the cork like Jeremy's got, that wall is going to be so much warmer on the inside that you're unlikely to get water condensing on it. So I suppose that's how it can solve damp. But yes, you could. There are situations where you can create moisture problems. But yeah, generally that's by using too much insulation on a wall type that's not really vapor permeable. But if you've got, how old's the wall, Ruth?
300 years or so.
Yeah. So it should be, unless it's been cement rendered on the outside or got some other covering on the outside, it should be vapor permeable. And it potentially insulating it inside should be able to get rid of condensation type damp.
Thank you. It does sound as though we've got gypsum plaster, which would need chipping all off. So,
yeah.
Right. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Roger's got a question. Roger?
Just a minute. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, we have a house which is probably about 300 years old, stone house. In some parts, the ground level outside is above the floor level inside, and there's obviously some evidence of damp on the bottom of the wall. I noticed on one of Keir's charts there was a picture of a French drain. Is that what we should be doing, or what's the best thing that we could do to tackle the damp in the bottom of the wall?
Shall I answer that, Marianne?
Yes.
I think the answer is yes. It's definitely desirable to put a French drain in if you can do, because that it's basically a trench with gravel in against the wall, and with a perforated pipe at the bottom that's going to take water away. So it will tend to lower the water level against the outside of the wall. We did do that a bit in our house here at the front, but it's a short piece of wall. I think it has helped somewhat. I think if I don't have lots of experience of French drains, to be honest, but I would say I know my colleague Alex would generally recommend it in an older house that's got damp problems in the walls. Obviously some don't, but an older house that does, he would generally say it's something you should be doing as part of the work if you can.
Just going to chip in because Alex recommended we had a French drain in, and we've got about maybe like a 8 meter stretch of three rooms actually. They're about a metre underground, and we put a French drain in, and it's worked really well. And actually, it's relatively a simple thing to do, in terms of digging a hole outside rather than taking stuff off from the inside, and not as expensive as some other measures in terms of i.e. tanking and things like that. So I'd really recommend, if you know if the damp issue is quite bad or you think it could get worse, that will probably mitigate most of that. And also depending how breathable your plaster is on the inside of that wall too. Right there, there's a picture, yeah, Keir. It was a nice, good clear picture of what a French drain should look like in
Yeah.
your PowerPoint. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. That's very useful. Some parts of the house do have just an open trench around them, and those parts seem better, but I don't know whether a French drain is better. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. David's got a question.
Yes, that's me. Yeah, we've moved into a 1930s house about 18 months ago, and to start doing renovations, we're going to have the roof redone, repaired and reslated and refelted, and I also want to replace the existing fiberglass insulation, which was done about 20 years ago, with cozy wool. 300 mil of cozy wool, and I just wonder I can see the advantages of it, but I just like more information on it. Would you get problems with animals or insects wanting to go into the cozy wool because it's more attractive because it's a natural fibre, more attractive than the existing fiberglass? So I'm just curious about that, and the advantages of cozy wool, which I've only come across fairly recently, in my researches online. So I'd just like some responses to that, please.
I think cozy wool, I mean, 300 mil of cozy wool is a nice thickness. That should give you a big, a good level of insulation.
Yeah.
I think one of the advantages of it is that it will tend to slump less than something like mineral wool over time. It tend to slump down, and obviously as it gets less thick, you're losing insulation.
Yeah.
Really, to get the best out of that insulation, the ideal would be that you'd have a vapor permeable membrane as well over the top of the cozy wool, so that you're not losing heat by air movement. I mean, I've got hemp fiber insulation in our loft, and we haven't put a membrane over the top. Should have done really, but we haven't, and that has made a big difference to the rooms below.
Well, we did intend to put a storage platform, of wood fibre boards. That would cover about 50% of the area, and then what you say would cover the rest of it with a impermeable layer. Then, that sounds. Would the board act as that? Do you think?
Yes, wood fibre board is pretty airtight, so so it's vapor permeable, but you won't get air movement being sucked through the board, so the board will do a good job. And it will also provide extra insulation as well, of course.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that's useful advice. And cozy wool's got it's not 100% wool. It's got some other additives in it, hasn't it? That's it.
I think it has a bit. I mean, I think, I mean, obviously they creatures probably will like it if there are creatures up there.
Yes.
But we've not. I mean, we've not had. I know we've had mice up in our loft from time to time, and we've not had any problem with them doing anything to the hemp fiber, for example. Or in fact, they don't seem to particularly nest in it either. So, I mean, they just seem to run about on the top of it.
Right.
So, I mean, I suppose potentially it could make a nice animal home. But I
Mm.
mean, the one thing I would say is obviously at the edges of your loft, in general, where you're insulating a loft, then you need to, as Marianne mentioned, you need to make sure
Yes.
there is ventilation at the eaves, so
Yes.
you're not stopping air moving around
Yes,
above.
I am aware of that because
Yeah.
the roof does need to be ventilated. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for
Okay,
that.
no problem.
There aren't any other questions, but Marianne, I just wonder if this might be a good time to bring in Pete.
Yes, yes. And this is Pete Burgess Allen from March's Energy Agency. And I'll let you say more about what you do in that MEA.
Thanks, Marianne. Thank you very much. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks for those talks. Really, really fascinating. Every time I hear speaking, it's always something slightly different and new. So it's always good. Yeah, I work for March's Energy Agency. Some of you I know, I think. So just a quick plug, really, for some funding we've had through to provide free retrofit surveys. So these are quite technical home surveys that we're making available across Derbyshire, also into Nottinghamshire, that NEP are delivering. So these are sort of PAS 2035 standard home surveys, and we're putting together quite nice little reports at the end of that process for householders so that you can understand what you might do. So if you've got a home that you're perhaps struggling with, you've got a damp wall, as Ruth was talking about there, that you're not sure whether insulation is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. Is your home suitable for a heat pump, or do you think solar panels are the way to go forward, but you're not sure what to do? This kind of support we can offer might help you. I've got a couple of slides. I don't want to waste too much time, but I'll try and just share those very quickly. So yeah, just is that looking okay? Just to say, yeah, so there's a contact number there at the bottom if you want to get in touch with us. We're aiming to provide in-person advice to homeowners, primarily focusing on the harder to treat properties. So those are the conservation areas, the old traditional buildings that many of you have been talking about, off gas grid properties, or just particularly not very good insulation, energy conservation properties. Producing a nice sort of tailored report. There's a couple of pages from as an example, just picking up on issues that you might have coming up. Are you about to refit your kitchen, or what's your budget like, that sort of thing. So quite personalized. And if you're really keen on this, then the advise just have a look at this website. You can use that QR code, and I'll pop that web address in the chat there as well. So you should be able to find an online application form. It just takes 2 minutes to fill that in, pop through to us. There's no obligation at that point. If you decide in the future, at some point, then that's fine. We can, but we'll get to you within a week or two. Got a nice on our books now who's helping us out with these, and is cracking on really well. So it shouldn't take very long for us to get through to you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those in a moment. Thank you.
Can I just check, is there any income level people need to be at?
No, it's not means tested, but so if somebody comes through and they're eligible for the grants, then we'll certainly advise people around what's available in terms of grants. I suppose we're more kind of expecting to get people who don't qualify for the grants, but maybe have a house that they're keen to upgrade, and are looking for kind of cost-effective, but make the right choices really to avoid expensive mistakes. So there's no kind of upper or lower income bracket at all. It's
That's what I was checking. Well, I think
Yeah.
from who's here, because I think people assume that that kind of advice and support, particularly for any help with the money side, is only for people on benefits.
Yeah, so this is government's pilot project really, just to try and illustrate the advantage of speaking to people directly around the problems rather than relying on providing some generic advice that doesn't really fit some of the the non-standard builds and product properties that we have a large number of up in this part of the world. So that's the point of the project really, and by registering and having one of these surveys actually kind of helps us to build a picture of what's useful, and that will then feed up through department for energy. So your participation sort of plays a little part in that whole sort of feeding up through the food chain, if you like. So yeah, it'd be great to hear from people.
Thanks.
There's a couple of questions in the chat, Marianne. One from Marigold and Martin, and also Ruth. So Marigold probably first.
Yes.
Right. I can see Marigold's can I see Marigold's question?
Well, that should be it. Can you hear us?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. We're looking to do external wall insulation, and we know to do that we'd have to extend our roof at the eaves and at the gable ends. How feasible is that? Because that seems to be a bit of a blockage, or very expensive to do.
It certainly can be done, and I think how complicated and how expensive depends on how much you need to extend the roof edge. I think you can get, I'm not particularly expert on this part of the installation, but I believe you can get a plastic extension that can be added to the roof edge if it's not a large amount that you need to come out by. Obviously, if you're having your roof, reslated, then I guess you could have some extra built on at that time at the edge of the roof. Yeah, I'm afraid that's probably all I could say about it at the moment, because it's not really an area of expertise for me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the roof's perfectly good, so it could end up being the deciding factor whether we have to go for internal wall insulation versus external. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And Martin?
Hi, Lisa. Yes, thank you. So we've got a brick-built house from the mid to late 1950s. About 20 years ago, we had some cavity wall insulation. It was the stuff that gets blown into your wall from a pipe. In the last probably decade, last 10 years, it just feels like the walls are no longer insulated. So we're making an assumption it's slumped or it was done poorly and there's air gaps in the walls. We'd really like to redo our insulation on all the external walls of the house. We probably last asked 5 or 6 years ago, and the company we asked said, "Oh, it's really difficult. It's really complicated. We'd need to pump out all the existing insulation, and then we'd look at what we could do after that." So it's really just to try and get some advice as to how you take this forward so that we do something in a more sustainable way. So do we have to remove it all? I assume the answer is probably yes. What's the process for that? And then what's the best sort of solution for a cavity wall at that point?
Does any of you feel able to answer that or give some signposting where to find out that information?
I probably can't be of much help. I don't know it does sound complicated and expensive, the removal, and I don't know much about that. I think if you didn't want to remove it, then you'd probably be better insulating the wall on the outside than on the inside, because there's less risk of moisture then. Do you think you don't know what was put in as the filler, do you, when it was when it was done?
No, we don't. Until somebody delved it back into the wall, we wouldn't be certain what it was, whether
Yeah.
it's sort of the small pellets or whether it's some sort of material.
Yeah, yeah. Because I guess how easily it can be removed probably depends on, whether it's still sort of, what it's made of, and whether it's still mobile enough to be sucked out and so on. But you think it's definitely worsened, has it, the insulation value of the wall?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. They are, I mean, for natural insulation inside, I think cavity walls are quite tricky because you often don't know what is in them. But yeah, I think all I can say is if you do want to insulate it and you don't want to take whatever's in there out, I would perhaps look at insulating outside if that is a possibility, because then
Yeah.
you're going to be warming that wall up, and it will be less of a problem, whatever's happening in there.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, that's a bit of a limited answer, but
No, that's fine. All right. Thanks, Keir.
okay.
And I just ask Pete whether the scheme that you're doing might like do a thermal survey to show what's happened to the cavity wall, whether that might make any difference.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. I know we've recently bought some little cameras, so we could certainly arrange to bring one along. Where are you, Martin?
In Chesterfield.
Right, okay, yeah. Well,
So I'll message you. I'll message you, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
And Cece's got a hand up, Marianne.
Well, yes, I was going to say that if you haven't done a thermal imaging survey yet, I'd highly recommend that as your starting point, because that'll show whether it's all fallen to the bottom, in which case it's more granular, or whether it's stuck in blobs, and then you've got blank blobs. It will show if there's all at one end, or it will just give you a much clearer picture of what you're working with. And so that would certainly be a starting point. And then getting somebody with advice in this area. Now, you need to be careful that they know what they're talking about, but then some professional advice could be very, very useful, worth the money you're spending on it.
Yeah. Thanks, CJ.
Could I just add that in my when I first had my separate work done, I had originally been told by the surveyor of the house when I bought it that there was rising damp. But my architect recommended someone to come who would check what was happening about the damp. And she came along and she pointed her little device at the wall and immediately said, "It's not rising damp." She was able to say that. So I don't, that would be an avenue to look at, someone who could actually check more carefully or accurately on what the moisture problem is, or if there is one.
Valerie's got a hand up, and also Helen is waving, but Valerie was first, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I too had cavity wall insulation done around that time, but just looking at the paperwork, it came with a 25-year guarantee. So if you still got the paperwork, I mean, I don't know if that's of any help, but
yeah, we have, Valerie, and we did check back with the company, and they were basically they were not helpful at all. I think they changed their name, and yeah, it was no longer worth the paper it was written on. But thank you. Yeah.
Bad luck.
And Helen, I think, wanted to come in.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in a 1930s house with cavity wall insulation, and the house is absolutely freezing. The company who did the work in 2004 have no longer exist, but there is an organisation called Cavity Insulation Guarantee Agency, and they were absolutely useless. So there's clearly no way to go there. But I remember hearing from a previous webinar that there is a very specific type of instrument, and I think it might have been called a boroscope. Does that ring any bells? Pete's nodding. Yeah. So I really don't know at the moment whether my cavity wall insulation is a problem or not. I just know I'm still freezing and don't know what to do about it, really. That's it.
Any?
The only other question was Ruth, which I think was in a question for Pete, actually. I think, Ruth, if you want to just ask. Are you there, Ruth?
I am, sorry, I keep muting because of noisy kids. Yes, I was just asking if for the for the home energy plans you needed an energy rating already to apply.
It's helpful, but I think it's not essential. I think if we can see that you're clearly qualifying, I think we'd certainly have a look. I think I've seen your name on a list already, haven't I? Possibly. So yeah, drop us a line if you like. Or
all right. Okay, thank you.
Happy to speak to you later if you like. Yeah.
I can't see any more questions in the chat.
No, right. Well, it's 8:27, so it looks like we've pretty well filled the time that we've had, and it does seem to have been, a very useful session in that, a lot of very interesting and useful information is being imparted, and also some people have had some pointers as to what they might do with whatever problem they're dealing with. So I think that at that point, I will call it to an end and say thank you very much for coming. And I will probably, I'm not sure if I get told everyone who's actually come, but I know that I couldn't send everyone a recording, and possibly if Keir is given permission to send these slides that people have shown as well. So I'll do what I can with that and let you know. Thanks very much for coming. So I think that's perhaps if everyone can go except the speakers home